Varus is the biggest, baddest boy in the bot lane with the introduction of the 8.1 patch, and you can argue that he might even be so even before that. And with the buffs to the AD carry atomization in 8.15, his friends Ashe and Jhin are looking to put the utility AD carries back at the forefront of the meta. Well, I'm no prophet, and it is very likely that the reduction in crypt itemization costing might result in hypercarry options like Caitlyn, Sivir, and maybe even Jinx rise again. But here's a brief rundown of how the utility AD carry team compositions have been used. The Season 6 World Championship saw the beginning of an extended period of dominance for these champions, with Ashe and Jhin being paired together with mage supports, being able to relentlessly rain poke down on your opponents to force bad base timings and break the game open via the bot lane turret. We saw the innovation of Zara and Miss Fortune as a response to such strategies during this tournament, which would solidify the understanding of how these lanes function. Spell-based trading lanes, where the bush side riverside dynamic needed to be constantly managed in order to get favorable trades off on your opponents. Now, that was a whole mouthful of jargon, but the key idea was that there were long range abilities that could bypass the minion waves and skill shot abilities that could not. So it was important for the players to swap between positions so as to get the open angle on your opponents and be able to land multiple spells from both champions on the same target while trading on your opponents while limiting your opponent to only being able to respond with one spell or be forced to match the trade by spreading out the damage. This focused spell fire would burn the potions of a player down, and once they no longer had the sustain to stay in lane, they were forced to break formation with their lane duo and lose control of the lane. This even sparked innovations in terms of itemization, where players would buy boots and 4 potions as a AD carry into these matchups so as to better dodge skill shots and more importantly, to have an extra 3 potions over their opponents should they choose for a Doran's item start. The Zara and Misfortune picks became such good additions to the bot lane as they were supports with long range spells that could bypass the minion wave, allowing for them to poke their opponents out without the need for much movement. Unlike an Ashe Karma lane who would repeatedly need to exchange positions to get the open angle, and in the midst of doing so have to cross paths and open up an opportunity for spells from their opponents being able to land on both characters. This meta would continue to develop through Season 7 and would see the introduction of Varus into this trifecta of utility AD carries, and it would fully mature at the height of the spring split through the playoffs. Teams quickly found out that it was paramount to have a jungler be able to pair with your mid laner to take control of the map in order to enforce the bot lane matchup, which meant that the top lane was left to their own tools, where teams would pick tanks of the likes of Rumble that could do a good job of slowing their opponent's attempts at the top lane takedown. The Flash Wheels were a great beneficiary of this meta and were able to win an IEM during this period just by mastering this style of play. But once people figured out the use of Iron and Hyper Carries as a means of sustaining out the initial assault and being able to hit their scaling power points, they didn't do so well at the MSI itself. While it still remained a large part of the meta in the very start of summer, it heavily revolved around the tempo game, generating the early game through the insane amount of poke the bot lane had access to, but ultimately not at the sheer amount of long range damage output and bully presence that the likes of an Astra, Kaylin, or Tristana would have in the later stages of the game. So it was teams that played utility AD carries and teams that say, you know what, we prefer the Caitlyn, we prefer the Tristana, we prefer the Astro. The Season 7 Summer Split saw a shift away from this style of play, with buffs to Duran Shield being the very big part of this. It negated a significant amount of poke damage by providing an increased amount of regeneration that these champions would dish out. Now, to the layman, to the average player in solo queue, this actually wouldn't have changed all that much. But the fact is that in the competitive setting, you still could play the same compositions. It's just that engaged supports were given a much larger window to find fights with your jungler, and it's no longer you have to come by wave 7 or else we are completely chunked out and they're on our tower, and if we come, they 2v3 us. As now they have an additional 2 to 3 waves on top of accounting for skill disparities. They have an additional 2 or 3 waves before they found themselves chunked out and having to choose between bad and worse options. Now, Tankam, Thresh, and Braum were the biggest beneficiaries of this, and they found their way back into the meta, and tank junglers started to be on the rise as well, such as Drani in particular, where picking a tank would mean the junglers would not have the same uptime in enforcing the poke matchup, as they're not able to repeatedly and constantly track the opponent jungler by being in their face, like what Lee Sin, Graves, Nidalee, Kha'Zix, and Rengar used to be able to do, and the window of execution became tighter and tighter, and to the teams that just picked Caitlyn, sat back and scaled, it paid them off because it was just so much more easier to go for scaling AD carry in these scenarios. That the final blow, however, would come in the release of Xayah and Rakan, a dual lane that could match the pushing prowess of the poke lanes through Xayah's kit, while being able to find easy engage on demand through Rakan's kit, on the very squishy mage support. The risk reward payoff to run the likes of Ashe, Varus, and Jhin, together with a mage support pairing, no longer tally. While Ashe Jhin and Varus have been sporadically picked for their strong laning phase, and in fact, it saw a little bit of an uptick during the season in preseason, where Avery, Comet, and Scorch was absolutely busted. The Sorcery Rune Tree made book really ridiculous, and you saw things like Zero support being played. It has taken until recently patch 8.14 because there were a lot of competitive games in the preseason. It's like the off season, there are no matches happening. It's only until the 8.14 patch where we are seeing a big re-emergence of these champions, with teams exchanging Ashe and Varus as they go to AD carries, especially in the LCK, the last few weeks of LCK. Now, however, this is a much different approach as compared to before, where they would be paired with a tank in the top lane for defense duty, a skirmishing jungler to play enforcer, and a mage support as their poking partner in crime. Tahm Kench and Braum are now the support pairings of choice instead. To get a better understanding of this, the jungler metagame plays a very large part as to why we aren't seeing the double poke lanes of old, with the Scuttle Crab timing being changed and the significance of securing it increasing. We are seeing a lot more uh, priority into crab clears, which requires supports to be able to respond should the opponent jungler contest for the Scuttle Crab. Zyra and other mage supports, while they do very well if you have an extended laning phase, you can whittle your opponent down over time. They don't do so well in close combat in the rapid team fights where you just want to blow somebody up in a skirmish in the close quarters of the jungle. In addition, the junglers of choice at the moment are gravitating towards Sejuani and Gragas, who as tank junglers are not necessarily able to guarantee winning 2v2 mid lane, and they aren't necessarily able to enforce the pushing poke lane as reliably as the likes of maybe a Lee Sin LeBlanc lane pairing would be able to do. Carry tops with a natural follow-up to having a tank jungler, and this completes the entire structure. And unlike the previous metagame where an Ashe composition would be linear focus on the bot lane, now teams have options on both sides of the map, so that even if they do not have the winning 2v2 matchup in the mid lane, they're still able to make something happen on the other side of the map.